That sense of witnessing, like I didn't realize at the time as I was going through it, how powerful that is in helping people heal. Like just witnessing without without jumping to a solution, without trying to find a way to fix it, without trying to, oh, you're so sad and that's terrible. Let's get you not sad anymore.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Will, the Right Wizard. And why don't we ask that question again? Let's do it. Should I kill myself or should I have a cup of coffee? Well, you know what you're listening to. You know, I choose coffee. I love that question. It is just so cool. You know, it's something that I think we should talk about and think about a lot more. And that's something that Nathan, who I'm joined by today, from the Distress Center of Greater Toronto's Suicide Survivor Program, that's what we talk about today. We talk about choosing life every day, that each of us has a choice whether or not we're going to continue on or not. It's such a fascinating conversation I have with Nathan. We talk about grief, we talk about loss, we talk about overcoming and moving through. We also talk about his own mental health challenges. Things get dark, but we keep it light. And that's why I just absolutely loved this conversation. So I hope that you will enjoy it just as much as I did. Let's get into it. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Will. Thanks.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, I was really intrigued when I got somebody reached out and set this up, so I'm happy to chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the first thing that we do here on I Choose Coffee is we talk about our drink of choice. So I want to know, what is your favorite drink these days and what is it that you love about it?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a coffee person. I have to have my coffee first thing in the morning, and also throughout the day too. But definitely that first one is essential. As I say that, I'm drinking a glass of water, which I
Hey,
often
oh,
drink
well.
too. But yeah, I would say my favorite drink is mocha, like a mochaccino, espresso based, with chocolate, obviously, and oat milk because I'm really trying to get off dairy. It's not something that I would make at home, but when I go out to order it, that's what I go for.
Mm. What is it that like about this like mocha
Mm.
coffee that you love so much? What is
Mm.
it?
The sugar, the sweetness, the chocolate,
That helps.
for sure. Yeah, I'm one of those people who like came to coffee kind of late, and I started basically because of all the cream and sugar that I could add to it. And anything chocolate is a bonus. And if the best ones are kind of just on the slightly bitter side, actually, so you get like the coffee, the chocolate, the cocoa all together, and it's really smooth and rich and dark. Maybe not so great for spring and summer, actually, now that I'm saying that, but
Well, we can change it at
that's
any
right.
time,
That's right. Yeah.
right?
Ice. We'll put it over ice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Put it over ice, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's why this question I always love it because it is an ever changing question.
Right.
It's not always consistent. I of course love my coffee, but maybe not at 11 p.m.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
so at different times it changes. But this is why it's always about that present moment. Like, what is it right now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I love.
Yeah. If I had to, yeah, if I could pick, yeah, any time of day, that would be it. Yep.
Nice, excellent. Well, thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
of course.
So, yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Suicide Survivor Program that's run through the Distress Center of Greater Toronto.
Hmm.
You yourself are a member, and you've graciously decided to come on and talk to me about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I really appreciate that. And I'm just wondering, to your own comfort level, if you could just share how you came to the Suicide Survivor Program and yeah, your experience with that thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because I feel like an organization like Distress Centers of Greater Toronto is one that well, for me, I wasn't aware of it. I had never heard of it, thought about it. It's one of those places that you don't need to know exists, maybe, until you need it. And thank goodness it's there. So yeah, I lost my sister, my older sister Angie, died by suicide, coming up on 2 years now, and I um, after that initial shock and grief and kind of getting through the funeral and those first few weeks, um, I kind of just kept going and kind of went on autopilot for several months and working, and then it just started gradually, kind of everything started crumbling, and I crashed hard, and just kind of everything stopped. Um, and I knew that I was well supported with my family. I have a therapist who's fantastic, and so I felt well supported. But I also knew I had a sense that I needed to speak with people who were also going through grief, at least, and that the idea of like a peer support group was kind of rolling around in my head for a while. And so months after my sister died, I finally kind of just went online and started searching for grief support groups, and I found an organization, and that was great. And I started. I had one session with them in a support group with other folks who were experiencing loss and going through their grief process. I realized pretty quickly it wasn't a great fit for me at that time because no one else in the group had lost someone to suicide, and
Mm,
so it was I found it very difficult listening to other people's stories about their grief. Um, it was intense and raw and real, but I felt like there was something a little bit different that I couldn't connect with, or didn't seem even safe to connect with, maybe. Um,
mm,
that experience of grief, yeah, that's universal, and of course, grief is grief, and but with suicide and kind of traumatic loss, there are differences. There are just other layers. And so that night, I got off the call with that group and instantly went back online. And I don't know why I had missed it the first time around, but Distress Centers of Greater Toronto came up when maybe I typed in the word suicide, I think.
mm.
And so I immediately reached out to them and got a response really quickly, and had a chat with Alex, who runs the suicide survivor programs. Um, and yeah, and so I was able to tell my story with him, and right away just felt like this kind of a kinship, talking to somebody who gets it and who just kind of understands some of the stuff that I would be going through. So I was kind of put onto some waiting lists, and I started uh, individual support through distress centers, and then started a group support, a
Right.
group peer group support as well.
Yeah. I thought you said something really interesting there, that when you joined the other grief support program, um, it felt like you weren't able to connect as well.
Mm.
Even though they had, of course, experienced a loss, but
Hmm.
that suicide itself is different. And although that may seem like obvious to
Mm.
us, I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more. Like,
Hmm.
what is that difference you think that makes suicide
Mm.
loss just like separate from other kinds of grief?
Yeah, it's funny because in the months and almost 2 years now since my sister died, I have been doing a lot of reading about grief and speaking with people. And um, grief is one of those things I'm finding that um, you don't understand until you've experienced it. And I had lost all four of my grandparents pretty early on in my life. By the time I was in university, my last grandparent had died, and so I had experienced some grief, of course, losing them, and that was very sad, and missing them. I've lost aunts and uncles to terminal illness, but this was my sister, and
Yeah.
B, it was by suicide. And so yeah, so on the one hand, um, understanding what grief is like, finally, for that first time where it was really raw and really intense and really close and personal.
Mm,
But then with suicide, there's all of this stuff kind of added on top of that. There's the stigma, um,
mm,
there's guilt, which I'm sure can come with other forms of grief, but the what
mm,
ifs, it kind of shattered everything really quickly. It was unexpected. Although in hindsight,
Yes.
there are signs, but it came as a huge shock. And so I've heard people say that there's no hierarchy with grief, right? Grief is grief, and we can't compare our suffering and our pain against somebody else's, and that's not helpful. And everybody has their own experience, and it's real to them. And at the same time, their different losses are different. When I lost my grandparents, they died of natural causes in their 80s, and it was sad, but it wasn't tragic and it wasn't traumatic.
Right.
Um, and so with
Hmm.
suicide, there's the grief, and then there's everything else that comes along with it. And so
Hmm.
that first meeting that I had with the other organization, listening to the folks' stories, there were things that I could connect with and relate to, but then there was everything else that no one was talking about and not experiencing.
Hmm.
And so not that one kind of grief or one kind of pain is better or more important than the other, but to be able to connect with people who just got it. Like it's like being in a group,
Hmm.
being in a club where everybody is just on the same page on some really fundamental levels.
I love what you said there, because two things can be true at the same time,
Mm,
right? That we cannot compare grief and that everyone is going to experience it in their own way, and that some forms of grief are different,
hmm
and unique to that person and that experience. And suicide loss is one of them. You're right.
hmm
There are so many complexities and things that are involved in it that do not come in maybe in the same kind of way or even at all in other forms
hmm
of loss,
I
right?
think so, yeah. And I know obviously there are other traumatic ways of losing somebody as well, and not to minimize anybody's experience with loss. I was hearing some of the people's stories about losing, elderly loved ones or loved ones who died after kind of a lengthy disease, terminal illness or chronic illness. And again, of course, that's terribly sad and terribly personally sad.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is different. It's just different. And so in our support group, we talked about how it felt like this belonging to a club that nobody wants to be in, that you never asked to be, that it's kind of like a horrifying thing that you are now a member of this group that a certain percentage of us are in, not by choice, but thankfully, there are these services and there is the distress centers of Greater Toronto that offer places where people experiencing similar loss can come together and experience it together and share their stories and have yeah just this instant feeling like, oh,
Mm.
they get it.
Yeah, I remember a Kurt who is part of organizing the SSP,
Mhm.
and he's a great part of that organization.
Mhm.
When I was speaking with him, he also said something similar. He's
Mhm.
like, "This is not a group that everyone is trying to get into.
Yeah.
This is not the one we all sign up for and are
Yeah.
excited about."
Yeah.
But you end up there, and there's something I think really powerful about being around others who are also not there by choice.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like we all ended up here, but we're all going to support each other in the best way that we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And over the weeks, I found too, like this sense of at the very beginning, um, myself and I feel like the other members of my group too were very reluctant and very nervous and apprehensive about what we were getting ourselves into. But as the weeks progress, it was this strange sense of actually looking forward to those weekly sessions of, oh, like it's going to be painful, it's going to be really hard, but I'm so
Mm.
glad that I have this space to do it and this outlet. And yeah, to form some community, that was a really unexpected um, thing to come out of
Mm.
it. That yeah, like I have these bonds with these people that I've never met in person, probably never
Yeah.
will, but we just yeah, that bond is connects us forever.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, I would love to get into that a little more. But I'd like to first understand, like, did you do the one-on-one program first and then move to the group? Was that your trajectory?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I don't know that my process was necessarily typical at distress centers, only because of timing. So I had spoken with Alex, and he said that he felt that I would benefit from the one-on-one support before joining a group, and I absolutely agreed. And in retrospect, it was definitely the right choice. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there is some logistical timing around when the facilitators are available to start and when I could join. And so, I was on a wait list for the group support. Um, and then, in the meantime, facilitators who could do the one-on-one support were available. So I was able to start that. And then, fairly soon after, within the first few weeks, a group opened up and just kind of unexpectedly. So I actually was in the midst of the one-on-one support when the support group started. And so there was some overlap for those first several weeks. So I was really kind of double dipping into support and getting really kind of I bombarded by support, which was amazing. I don't know that everybody is able to do it that way, but it was more of an overlap rather than sequential. Yeah, definitely two different but very similar ways of supporting people. They were both
Mm-hmm.
incredibly beneficial in their own unique ways.
Could you first speak to the benefits of the one-on-one session? Like, what would those like, and what you kind of got from those?
I think what was really, the most helpful was having the time and the space just to focus on my experience and my loss and my journey, with two folks who got it, and who were there just for me. Like it felt there were times when it felt really selfish, but also very grateful that I had that opportunity to just share time with these two people who were holding space for me, and to ask questions and to listen to what I was going through, and just to help kind of process. Um, I think distress centers is really great at pointing out that this is not therapy. These are not um, certified or trained psychotherapists, at least not in this capacity. But they're folks who know how to listen, and have an enormous compassion and empathy, and just choose to show up and be there to witness somebody going through really the worst times of their lives. The group was great because I could speak with other people and hear their stories as well, but that especially at the beginning, I think it was really necessary for me to be able to tell my story just to those two amazing listeners who were not
Mm-hmm.
there to participate in the same way as the group members were. They were there to facilitate and to just create that container where they could support me.
Mm. I think you hit on something really interesting. You mentioned that in the past you've had a therapist and you've been working in the therapeutic process for a long time,
Hmm.
and yet going to the one-on-one program in which you were with the distress center and working with these two individuals
Hmm.
was very different and not like therapy.
Hmm.
What what is that difference exactly? What, like,
Hmm.
you were already doing therapy, but then this had its own benefits, its
Hmm.
own difference. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, I think the first thing is that I believe the way the program is structured, when you do the one on individual support, which is actually kind of two people on one, two
Yes.
people supporting me. Um, Usually, I believe at distress centers, one of those facilitators has experienced a loss by suicide, and sometimes it's both. And in my case, it was both people who had.
Mm.
Um, my therapist, as far as I know, has not lost someone to suicide, at least not that they've ever spoken about to me. And nor do they need to help me through that therapeutic process. It's a different process. Um,
Mm.
but to have people who have some personal experience with it and also not having that therapeutic agenda. My therapist is incredible, and we've worked together for a long time, and he's been super helpful and supportive. But this was a different kind of support where it was just people who listened without a lot of input, which sounds kind of strange, but they asked really great questions and they listened and they kind of helped guide conversation, but they were not there, and they were clear at the outset, and I appreciated this, that they are not there to help fix anything. And
Mm,
grief and loss by suicide is not a problem to be fixed. And they didn't offer solutions, and they didn't offer pat answers, and they didn't offer silver linings. And um, it was not about helping me get over this as fast as I could. Not that therapy is either, but it's yeah, they're just there as humans who want to help other humans. They're not paid for it,
right.
they're volunteers. I know that there's training at distress centers, but they're not trained in psychotherapy. And so
Mm,
they are not sitting there trying to analyze and trying to find next steps for me or trying to find strategies to help me cope other than expressing what I was going through.
amazing how powerful that can be
Hmm.
with no agenda,
Hmm.
right? Because like I think you said something that's it's interesting that like sometimes in therapy it can have this therapeutic agenda where
Hmm.
it's like we want to go from one particular place to another place,
Hmm.
right? We want to bring you from where you are to somewhere that you want to be.
Hmm.
Um, and not all therapy is like that,
Right.
but it can have that kind of sense to it.
Hmm.
Whereas this sounds a lot more like presence and witnessing,
Yeah. Yeah.
where it's just being there together in the space and not trying, like you said, not trying to fix anything.
Hmm.
That in itself, trying to move things along is not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the presence and being there that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That sense of witnessing, like I didn't realize at the time as I was going through it, how powerful that is in helping people heal. Like just witnessing without jumping to a solution, without trying to find a way to fix it, without trying to, oh, you're so sad and that's terrible, let's get you not sad anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah, just yeah, no preconceived ideas of where it's going to go, other than, yeah, we hope that through this program, this support, yes, you do end up feeling lighter, and hopefully it helps you on your healing journey. But it's not, let's do 8 sessions and then you're fixed and grief is over and you are fine
Hmm.
now. It's just, let's get
Right.
you through this period of time. And
Hmm.
yeah, the power of telling your story, somebody hearing your story. Um, yeah, that was an incredible thing.
So yeah, let's begin with your experience in the group session.
Mm.
So you moved on. You were doing the one-on-one session, and then the group session sounds like in tandem. But if you could just speak a little bit to that first experience in the group, like what is that
Mm.
first day like for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, it's oh gosh, I'm thinking way back to that. Um, First of all, it's virtual. It's a virtual group, and so there's already a layer, right, of, or a divide, I guess. Obviously, we're seeing each other, we're hearing each other, but we don't get to physically see each other. We can't
Mm,
uh, we can't turn and look at the person beside us, or even that idea of small talk, right? So the first session, we get in and it's all these, you know, faces on a grid on Zoom, and you can tell everybody is really apprehensive about being there, about
mm,
what are we getting ourselves into? This is going to be so difficult and painful. Why have we signed up for this? Um, and sharing. I was very glad to have shared my lost story initially in the one-on-one support, that helped a lot. So even just getting used to talking about losing my sister to suicide, saying the words, and hearing other people say the words too. There's something about telling your story out loud to people, and sometimes I think it's even more powerful when it's strangers. I
Mm,
don't know, it releases something, like some of that power that the grief has over you when you're able to talk about it really openly, especially to people who have experienced really similar things. That was really healing. Super difficult, really painful, but yeah, really so helpful in healing. Um,
mm,
but incredibly difficult. Like I spent, I think
yeah.
the vast majority of those sessions, I was in tears the whole time, and not just because of my own suffering and my own experience, but
Mm,
listening to the other folks and understanding on some level what they were dealing with and going through, and just like the sense of compassion from everybody in the group, like just terrible sorrow that other people had to experience, that that's just happened to them and was happening to them. Um, yeah, there was something in sharing that together, kind of carrying that load together, that was incredible. Again, not that you ever wish that on anyone,
right.
but here we are, and thank God that we have this and we found each other and the facilitators, Um, yeah, really difficult to hear people's, especially, well, I don't know if it was just especially the first time, but every
Yeah.
week was really hard to watch people and to hear them. But incredible to hold space, and they held space for me, and we had this amazing community where we could come and just show the most real, rawest parts of ourselves as we went through these really horrible times.
Yeah. I find that so interesting. I think a lot of people do, and it may be also a part that of a group session that I didn't fully comprehend myself
Mhm,
is that we have your own challenges, your own grief, and your own suffering that you're
mhm,
dealing with, but then you are also holding space for others
mhm,
and theirs.
mhm.
How does holding space for others in that sense um, help you through your own suffering and grief? Like,
Hmm.
is there some way that that connects with you?
Yeah, yeah. And again, like all these lessons I've learned, I never would have anticipated, coming on kind of on the other side. Not that I'm over everything, but just having come through that
Of
experience, at
course.
least initially, um, learning things about how grief works. And um, grief is really self-focused. It's not in an egocentric way, but um, it's all about me and my experience and what's going on in my mind and in my heart, and feeling like I'm all alone in this. Even though I had family and friends and people supporting me, I felt incredibly lonely. And so to know that there were other people in this group that I met with every week, that they possibly were feeling the same kinds of things. There was, again, it's weird to think, but like camaraderie, and being able to say, listen, as you're sharing your story, I get it. I don't understand all of it. It's personal to you, but I do get the basics of it.
Hmm.
And you do for me too. And so by being able to focus on somebody else and their pain and their grief, it helped lighten a little bit for me too, I think. And knowing that they were going to do it too when it was my turn. Um, Also understanding really fundamentally that there are other people going through this, that I'm not alone in this. This is not unique to me, that I'm not the only person in the world who has ever lost somebody to suicide, that there are many of us out there. I guess that's the thing. Like yes, of course, I'd heard about suicide in my life, and maybe people kind of like far kind of the circles, very distant to me. Maybe I had heard of somebody dying by suicide, obviously in the media and news and entertainment. But in my own personal life, like we didn't, nobody talked about it, and I don't think people talk about it nearly enough. But to see like, oh yeah, like there is a whole, there's a huge group of us out there dealing with this, and maybe dealing with it on our own. So to be able to come together and to share and have that commonality and see you're not alone in this. There are other people um, who need
Mm-hmm.
support from me, and will support me as well, and just understand.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something that I have learned through my experience with the Distress Center as well. I'm an inbound responder, a volunteer inbound responder on
Yeah.
Distress Line. And I have found that when I'm doing my best to support someone in an interaction, I forget about all of my own problems.
Mm. Hmm.
I not forget. I It's more like I put them aside for the moment because what's more important is the person in front of me.
Mm.
And there's something I think really beautiful about that.
Hmm.
It allows me to, like you said, to feel like I'm not alone.
Hmm.
Feel like, I'm not the only one who's suffering here.
Hmm.
And it doesn't, like we said before, it doesn't take away from our own
Mm.
grief or from
Hmm.
our own suffering, but it helps us feel connected to others
Hmm.
and recognize that this is a shared human experience that we're
Yeah.
having.
Yeah, that human aspect of it, I feel like, at least for me and maybe in our society, often I feel very separate and disconnected from other humans. Maybe living in the city, that doesn't help it either. Um,
Right.
Being online doesn't help. But this idea that, yeah, it's a very human thing. Like it's just humans helping other humans, and helping other people absolutely helps not take everything away, but to lighten the load a little bit. And I guess when we share in that, right, when we're able to carry those burdens together, it gets a little bit lighter. um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so supporting somebody while they're supporting me, that was a really beautiful thing. And just the sense of compassion for other humans on a really deep, real level, where it's like, this is the only thing that matters right now. This is
Mhm.
you are in such pain, I'm in such pain, and let's help each other.
Mhm.
Let's help each other a little bit, just to share in that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, what an experience,
Yeah.
Like it's like we've been saying throughout this, it's something we never wish on anyone, but to be able to go through that together with someone must be just so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So grateful. So grateful. Um,
Mhm.
and thinking about, I was constantly amazed, and I still am, why the facilitators, these volunteers, including you on the distress lines, people facilitating the one-on-one support and the group programs, why on earth are you all choosing consistently to show up and to hold space for people and to listen to the most horrific stories, and to see people going through terrible, terrible pain and darkness and heaviness, such heaviness? Um, why on earth would somebody choose to do that? And I'm so grateful that you all do, and I am starting to understand it, and understand, oh, that giving back, or that paying it forward in some way, support, finding some purpose or some meaning out of really meaningless loss.
Yes.
Helping people, now realizing that there are so many other people who are in the same position who need help and will continue to need help, and wanting to do that for them, knowing somewhere deep down, it's like, yeah, I do have that capacity actually, where I could offer support to somebody who's going through something. Um, it
Mhm.
helps me, and it helps them, and so that's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. Now, I appreciate your sentiment, for what a lot of the people in the helping world in the distress center are trying to do. But I think it's something that you have experienced, and because you were doing it as well
Mm,
in the group
mm,
sessions, like that's exactly what that feeling is. It can be very heavy. It can be terrible, and hearing people's stories can be so difficult.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it allows for this visceral human connection
Mm-hmm.
that comes through, and it's just different than other kinds of connection. Connecting with friends and joy, or
Mm-hmm.
family and loved ones. Like, these are incredible experiences. They're
Mm-hmm.
what human life is all about. But when you connect with someone who is in the depths of their own sorrow,
Mm-hmm.
just by being there with them, it is such a powerful experience,
Yeah.
and it can be so heavy, but then it lightens the load
Mm-hmm.
in some way
Mm-hmm.
of just being with it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm discovering through my work with the Distress Center. It's been so interesting. I'm not even sure that I can fully comprehend it and put it into words yet,
Yeah.
but that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how that sense of lightness too in the midst of incredible heaviness. Um, I think the first session, one of our facilitators said, you may not believe it right now, but over the next several weeks there will be laughter in our sessions. I was like, what are you like? Come on,
Yeah,
like
no way.
no way. I haven't laughed, I haven't smiled in months. Not about to start, but very quickly it's like unburdening yourself allows some of that lightness to come in a little bit at a time. And so it wasn't
Mhm.
all there were moments of laughter and humor and release in that way too. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible the kinds of conversations that and the things that come up when people are allowed just to be themselves and to share really, really honestly.
I think that's such an important point, that lightness needs to be brought into the conversation,
Mm,
especially in suicide,
mm,
because it is such a sensitive subject. It's a very deeply traumatic and heavy loss. We need that lightness in order to move through it and process it,
mhm.
because otherwise it's just too much,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so, like, something like finding those little moments of laughter, or just the sheer, comical absurdity that we're all in this situation
yeah,
now.
yeah.
There is a level of that it's, of course, really difficult to get to, but when you arrive there, you're like, yeah, here we are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It is absurd. It was the most absurd thing, and
Right.
still, I'm still. I find myself there are moments when I'm still gobsmacked at the absurdity of the situation, the horror of it, but also just like, what? How is this possible? Like, how does the
Right.
world work? How is this allowed to happen? And so, yeah, to share that with other people and to hear them express the same kind of thing, like just that, like what
Mhm.
my brain cannot compute this.
Right.
Uh,
What is this life?
yeah,
That I'm experiencing this, and I'm having to go through this,
yeah,
and so there's it starts, of course, in that really heavy place, but then it moves just like, how are we even here?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that lightness is something that's important in the conversation.
hmm
Not only for people who have actually experienced the suicide loss itself, but for the general public
hmm
and people
hmm
to start having these conversations more,
hmm I agree.
right? Because there's that avoidance so much.
Yeah.
And actually, there's actually something I wanted to ask you about. One of the things that I've found, or one of the issues I've found in the way that suicide is presented in media and pop culture right now, is if we look on YouTube, for example, the word suicide is censored in many, many
Right.
videos.
Right.
I understand why they're doing this.
hmm
They're trying to be suicide safe, and
hmm
they're trying to avoid triggering people.
hmm
But what do we lose in this
Yeah.
by censoring such a word?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could speak to your ideas about that word suicide and
hmm
how that's presented these
Absolutely.
days.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I decided pretty early on that I was going to use the word suicide as often, maybe not as often as possible, but whenever it
Yeah.
came up. Like it's
Right.
fascinating to me the language that we use in our society and in some cultures. Um, around death at all and loss and grief. It's this universal thing. Every single one of us will die. Every single one of us will eventually lose somebody in some way. Um, and yet we don't know how to talk about it. And even saying, my sister died, the first time I said it, that was incredibly difficult to say. It's still difficult to say, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't even say died very much. Like people say, oh, so and so passed away or we lost them. It's like, where are they? Do you need to go find them? They're not lost. They're dead.
Right.
They're no longer alive, right? And so, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that so and so passed away. All of these
Mm-hmm.
oblique ways of talking about death, period. And then suicide, definitely, that's pretty taboo. And yes, I understand we would never want to glorify suicide or present I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, the sense that suicide is contagious somehow. Um, I know that it's a fine line in mental health about not, you know, not suggesting things that people don't need to be thinking about when they're in crisis. But if we never talk about suicide and the reality of it and the fact that it happens and it happens every day to thousands
Yes.
of people in Canada, then there's so much shame and so much that's hidden and covered up and not allowed to be expressed. And I found many times
Mm-hmm.
in my life with different things, like the more we try to cover up and suppress and repress, oppress things, the darker and heavier those things get.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we're suddenly confronted with them, we don't know how to deal with it because we feel like we're the only ones who have ever experienced it, that we shouldn't be, that there's shame in it, that we are in the wrong.
Right.
And so bringing things to light and just putting it out there and saying, yep, suicide is a reality. Suicide
Mm-hmm.
happens every day. And so many people are affected by losing people that they
Yes.
love and care about to suicide. I think as a society, we need to be talking about that a lot more in order, to help the people who are experiencing the loss and to say, again, you're not alone. There's you are not wrong and you're not in the wrong. And also for folks who are considering suicide, I often wonder, if my sister had felt comfortable in coming to us, to her family, to her friends, to other people, and saying, I'm thinking about this. This is something that I can't stop thinking about. Um,
Right.
and when if nobody else is talking about it, again, not to glorify it or to say that this is a great option, but to say this is a reality. I'm considering ending my life. I'm not sure what else to do. Um,
Yes.
Maybe if she had felt more comfortable or that there was no shame attached to that,
Mm-hmm.
then we would have been able to help.
I do personally believe that being able to talk openly about suicide, whether that's on a grander sociological level
Mhm.
or on a very deeply personal level, of which you're having these thoughts and considering that option,
Mhm.
like you said, by not talking about it, it becomes this heavy shadow that you cannot show anyone.
Yeah,
It fuels shame and it
yeah,
fuels guilt, and I think it even makes it seem like it's the only option because then it's even more isolating.
yeah, yeah.
And so, like you said, like if we can bring this discussion, like trying to, in a sense, normalize the conversation
Mhm.
in which having suicidal thoughts is a part of the human experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not everyone experiences it,
Right.
but many,
Yeah,
many people do.
yeah,
And there are so many people who experience it who do not talk about
yeah.
it. We don't have those numbers.
Mhm. Mhm.
Those numbers and that statistic is astronomical.
Yeah,
But we don't see it.
yeah,
We don't see how many people are really thinking about this,
yeah.
And it's just something that I have seen through my work with the Distress Center, and
Hmm.
which has been an incredible experience to be able to see how much this is not some strange abstract concept that only exists in certain people.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
this is prevalent in the entire human race. you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's no, yeah, it's not abnormal. It's not shameful. It's not pathological. It's,
Mhm.
I believe it's often a pretty rational um, way that your mind, that your spirit is trying to deal with whatever you're struggling with, right? That is like, I need out of this. I need out of this situation. I need out of my mind. I need out of the pain and the struggle. um, that that seems to be the only option. And so when we get we I believe that when if we feel like we can't even say those words to somebody
Yeah,
else, whether it's a therapist or a friend or a family member or a stranger, then yeah, then it's it just adds to that cycle, right, of isolation and shame and distress.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a philosophy that I particularly love called Absurdism, that was supported by, or mostly purported by, a man named Albert Camus.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes this incredible novel called The Myth of Sisyphus,
Mm-hmm.
in which the first part of this book and the question that he's pondering is, he suggests that the only real philosophical question that we need to answer is suicide.
Hmm.
He goes into an argument suggesting that we need to really address this question, because recognizing that it is absolutely an option
Mm-hmm.
for every one of
Mm-hmm.
us,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that we all are capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fascinating thing because it really brings it into the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
We do all have that choice.
Yeah.
We all have that choice,
Yeah.
and we all have that choice to not
Mm-hmm.
as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that both of those are there, and that those exist. And I think it's been something that I've that book has really inspired me in a lot of ways to continue this kind of work. It's
Mm,
just fascinating to
it
me.
is that, yeah, it's
Mhm.
yeah, I think maybe we don't think about that, that there is, it's almost well, it is a binary choice. It's like I choose to live every day, whether that's by default or unconsciously, or I choose to end this life, of my own accord. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That's also something interesting that you brought that up because, um, as I was as it feels very false to talk about like that I have moved through grief because it's not done. It will never be
Of
done. I will
course.
never be over this. I carry this
Yes.
now for the rest of my life. It's just an unchangeable fact.
Mm.
But in those earlier days and those really scary, dark days, weeks, months, um,
Mhm.
I realized that I was choosing to live. And for a long time, it really was a day by day thing where I would wake up and like,
Yes.
well, I guess here I am, and I guess I'm choosing to still be here. I'm choosing not to. I can't follow my sister, but I'm choosing, for now. I'm choosing to stay
Yes.
alive, at least for today, and we'll see what tomorrow is like. So that choice,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and then to think, we I often hear, suicide is selfish, that it's the most selfish thing somebody can do to take their own life. And I strongly, I'm strongly against that. I don't believe that at all. I believe that it is a desperate um, response to how somebody is struggling inside, and that they feel that there is no other option, to make that choice, to come to that choice and say, no, this is it. This is the only thing I can do now. Um, I think must be incredibly difficult. Um, and somebody said, earlier on, somebody in my family said that they were angry at my sister for ending her life, and of course that's appropriate. That makes sense. My
Mm.
sister would have said that herself. She would have said, "Yeah, that's an appropriate response. That
Mhm.
makes sense for you to be angry. Yeah, of course you are." But I really didn't. I still don't really find that I have a lot of anger toward my sister because I feel like if she, the pain that I feel now that she's gone, now that she chose to leave, I can't even imagine the pain that she had as she was contemplating doing that and then deciding and taking action to do that. The pain that she was going through must have been so enormous that it was not an act of selfishness. It was just an act of despair and
Mm,
distress, and I need to do something to stop it. And this is the only way I can think of. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing that in. I think that's an important part of the conversation that we try to avoid, is that the choice that is made, um, in some circumstances, it's a they're driven to it through despair and through their own suffering and they find this is the only way. But there's also a choice there, there is a choice there, and that both of these things can be held
Hmm.
at the same time,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like that you can have unbearable suffering that is uh, creating a certain mindset that's leading you to this decision,
Hmm.
and then also that agency that person is choosing, and this is
Hmm.
what makes suicide such a fascinating, complex part of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And this is
Absolutely.
why when we were talking earlier, when we said that this death is different than other kinds of
Mm-hmm.
grief, I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that's my personal view, is that it's that element of choice that is involved in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
100%. Yeah. And not understanding, a lot of us not understanding how or why somebody could make that choice. But yeah.
Yes,
But
right. Exactly. And that we never really will,
hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Cuz it's something that only the individual can really answer.
Yeah.
And even being able to communicate that, I don't think we would ever really understand,
Yeah. 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 Well, and even suicide notes, right? Like um the
Mm.
most horrible, painful thing I have ever read in my life was my sister's suicide note. And when I thought later on, I thought about what it would have taken for her to sit down and write it before she ended her life.
Mm.
Like that must have been the most, uh, yeah, just the most
Mm.
terrible, terrible thing to do, to say goodbye and to know what this would do um, to her family and
Yeah.
her friends. And yeah, and no way to explain it, right? You can't ask questions after the fact. You can't you can read into things, you can try to interpret things, but yeah, we will never know. We'll never know. It's
Mhm.
accepting that unacceptable stuff for the rest of our lives.
Mhm. I would love to just tap into something that you were talking about. You mentioned making the choice to live every day.
Mhm.
Then, and you and I have talked before that you yourself have had some challenges with mental health.
Mhm.
As many of us have,
Mhm.
including myself. But you have yourself have dealt with this.
Yeah.
Could you speak to a little bit about that, like that choice to live every day in your own through your own struggles?
Mm. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I've lived with depression as long as I can remember. I would say my whole adult life, definitely when I was a teenager, and really even thinking back to when I was a kid, I can see, I think it was there all along. Um, and so over the years, there was lots of struggle, especially for the first half of my life, I would say, where I struggled against that. Like I kind of was trying to push back against depression as this kind of thing that was hanging over me all the time or a lot of the time. And I eventually came to the point where I just kind of accepted that this was a fact of my life, that this is just part of how I am in the world.
Mm,
That there are things that I can do to help and to alleviate things for sure, and working in therapy and doing lots of work and reading and thinking and talking. Um, it helps for sure, but it never takes it away completely. Just accepting that fact that it is what it is, and that's something that I have learned, or I'm learning about accepting loss as well. Like this idea, I think it's like a Buddhist way of thinking that a lot of the suffering in our lives is because we're struggling or resisting against something that's already happened. And so in our groups, the support groups, we would talk, facilitators would talk about accepting the unacceptable. And at first I was like, I will never accept that my sister
Right.
is dead, that she
Mm.
ended her own life. But eventually it came around to the fact where, to the point where I was able to accept it in the sense that it is a fact, that it's an unalterable fact. I cannot bring her back. This is not
Mm.
changing ever for the rest of our lives. This was not going to
Mm.
change. It's permanent. There's nothing to be done to fix it, to undo it. And so when I was able to accept at least that, it did ease the suffering a little bit. Like still incredible intense pain and sadness and sorrow, but at least I wasn't struggling against the fact that it is what it is. Um,
Mm.
and so I had already experienced that kind of with my own depression of just, okay, it is what it is. Let's go along for the ride. Let's ride the peaks and the valleys. And when it gets dark and heavy, do what I can, what I know to do to get through it, basically. I My sister died in the summer, and that summer I was not doing very well myself, and I wasn't exactly thriving, the day before she died, and then suddenly things went downhill. It was like, well, I was already struggling with depression, and then my sister died by suicide,
Wow.
and so that that shattered everything. It also made things that I had worried about or had been depressed about seem so insignificant. And I beat myself up for a long time thinking like, you know, none of that matters. None of that is important. Like now I finally see something that actually matters, something
Mm.
that's actually worth getting depressed and grieves about. As I said, I have a therapist. I've been in therapy for a long time on and off through my adult life. And I already had this therapist in place when my sister died. And I'm so grateful for that, so that we had a relationship and we could just
Yeah.
get right into it. And he supported me through those initial months of grieving. It's really strange to think that my sister is the one who died by suicide, because there have been many times in my life where I thought maybe I would be the one.
Mm.
And if anybody had told me in, years ago, if they had said, "Oh, your older sister is going to take her own life," not in a million years, and certainly not before I did. If we're gonna
Mm.
place odds here, if I was a betting guy, I would say no. If anybody's gonna do it, it's gonna be me. So yeah, I do want to say, like, the grief is very different from the depression that I've experienced. I
Mm.
continue to experience both. The grief, I've always had this sense that it makes sense to me. Like, I don't question the grief. When I was like curled up in a ball, wailing and sobbing, I was like, this isn't, I'm not concerned by that. My friends, my family,
Mm.
loved ones would say, they're really concerned. I'm like, no, 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 I'm fine with the fact that I'm doing this. It hurts like hell. It's the worst pain I've ever felt, but it is appropriate to the situation. Like, I'm not
Mm.
questioning why I'm going through this grief and feeling these intense things. It makes sense. Depression doesn't make sense to me because there's not always
Yeah.
a reason that I can point to. I can't say, oh, this is why I'm depressed, and this is what I can do to change it. So the grief, when it shows up, I'm like, oh yeah, here we are. That makes sense. Um,
Mm.
and also having suicidal ideation at many times through my life. Just those thoughts of maybe this is the
Mm.
solution, and I've never gotten to the point where I've made plans, but I've certainly had lots of times where I've thought living is
Mm.
not bearable, and this may be the only way to stop it. That I don't necessarily want to die. I just don't really want to be alive. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and have to deal with what's going on in my brain. in my
Mm,
life, it would be so much easier just to stop existing. Um,
mm-hmm.
and so when people would say, I can't understand what your sister was thinking, or how she could do something. I'm like, oh, I get it. I do actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get how somebody could get to such a
Yes.
point where this is the only way that they can see to get relief. I think all of these things we just need to talk about a lot more. I'm
Yes.
pretty lucky that I have people in my life, that do talk about these things and feel safe and comfortable talking about. But I think the more we talk about this, the more we acknowledge what each of us goes through, um, then we destigmatize it. We take it out of the shadows. We stop making it
Yes.
so mysterious and hidden and shameful. It's already dark. It's
Mm-hmm.
already dark. So why don't we don't need to add more to that by keeping it at bay or pretending it doesn't exist or that it shouldn't exist. And if it does, then something's very wrong with you.
Right. That is exactly what I've been trying to kind of present and be part of, is that awareness that this is normal. It is,
Yeah.
or it's common at least,
Right. Right.
it's at least common,
Right.
because, and it's been common for as long as human beings have been walking this
Yeah.
earth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's something that, yeah, it's like you said, if the more we push it away, the more that we don't talk about it, it builds stigma, it becomes this darker force, and then everyone becomes more isolated
Yeah.
and disconnected.
Yeah.
So you coming on here and talking so openly and so real about your experiences with this, I think is just so powerful, because it allows others to see that they can too talk about this, that it's okay to have these thoughts, that you're not weird,
Yeah.
that you're not pathological
Yeah.
or broken. No, you're actually very human,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
have these, that, yeah, that human life can be extremely difficult,
Mhm.
very challenging for
Mhm.
many people.
Mhm.
And that sentiment of wanting to not have to deal with it anymore is totally
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Given the situations that we have to deal with,
Yeah.
So, and yeah, just I would like that to become more a part of the conversation.
Mhm.
That's what I really want to see happen, more around the world, but especially here in the GTA.
Yeah.
And that's what we, you and I here doing this podcast, and the Distress Center, and anyone else who's trying to support suicide awareness is doing,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. We gotta start talking about the hard stuff and letting people know that they're not alone in this.
Well, I would love to move to the Walk to End Suicide.
Mhm. Mhm.
So this is an event that the Distress Center is putting on as a fundraiser to support the programs like the
Yeah.
SSP, and also the distress lines themselves. And actually, I was not at the event last year,
Mm.
but you were,
Mhm.
in fact, at the event
Yeah.
last year. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah. It took a lot for me to get there, to be honest. I kept thinking about it and putting off kind of registering for it. I made a commitment to myself that I would do it, but I second guessed it kind of all the way up to that morning, whether I could do it, or what I was going to get out of it, or what it would be like. Um, it was really hard, especially that first time. I'm going to do it again this September, but I feel that would probably be a different experience. The first time was really hard, and also again, like, seeing that community, seeing a sea of everybody in the same t-shirts, and congregating together on the lake shore, and then starting the walk, and seeing just it felt like mile after mile of people. um Again, realizing that there are so many of us that are affected by suicide, is horrifying. And that sense of compassion and empathy, when I would look at each person who passed me and say, you've lost somebody the same that I have, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe it. I can't believe that you've have to go through that and carry that forever. It's not right to me. It's horrifying to me, and it's really um, uplifting in a weird way to know that there is a community of people who are there to support each other, to bring awareness, to talk about it, to show that look how many of us there are who have lost somebody. And this is a tiny percentage of the population, right? Of people who have actually been affected,
Mm.
right? This is a small representation of it. And to know that, also to know that there are people who are still surviving, that there are people who have been
Yes.
doing this for a long time and who are now in a position where they can support other people and they can be more visible and they can share their experiences and not in a way that they're not debilitated by it. Um,
Hmm.
to show that it's possible, again, not to come to the out the other side of grief, but to have moved forward in their grief. We don't move on from it. It's not something that we're
Right.
done with, but to move forward and say, well, every day I am going to survive and I'm going to continue bearing
Yes.
this. That was pretty incredible to show what's possible. Maybe not this year, maybe next year I will be in that same
Mm.
position. So I registered for the walk, and there is like a very low threshold of fundraising that you need to do in order to get the T-shirt to wear at the event. And so I committed to raising that whatever that dollar amount was last year, and there's a whole online thing, set up my page and just kind of briefly told my story and why I was doing this. And then I just forwarded the link to just close family and friends. And I thought, hopefully I'll get this minimum donation, right? And then I'll go on
Right.
the walk and I'll be able to wear the t-shirt. I was floored by people's generosity and support, and people that are not within my own circle or even my outer circle. Like people kind of came out of the woodwork, and then friends of friends would forward the email, and people that I don't know, that I haven't met. A lot of them knew my sister, um, or
Mm.
knew about her, or knew about our family. But just the messages that I would see on my page of support, and um, it was incredible, like the outpouring. And I was able to raise much more than I would have ever anticipated. And
Hmm.
I mean, incredible that there are so many people generous enough to give financially, um, and to support really, really important programs at distress centers. Like, again, most of us hopefully never have to know about these programs, never have to access them. I really hope no one does, but I know that some of us
Mm.
will. And so I'm so glad that they exist. They need the funding, and this
Hmm.
fundraiser is so important. And so when people, I was just amazed at people just opening their hearts and also opening up their checkbooks, metaphorically, to give and to support. And I was able to share with them too how the programs were a lifeline to me. I'm
Mm.
not exaggerating when I say I believe that the support programs that I received are a big part of why I'm here today.
Wow.
They helped get me through a very, very, very dark period. And again, it didn't solve anything, it didn't fix anything, but it was enough to make me decide to get out of bed every day and still be here. So um, it's so essential. I know there's so many great causes out there, so many people who are asking for donations and so many worthy charities. But if people could consider supporting somebody on the walk or making a donation to distress centers, that money it's life saving. And also the prevention, the preventative work that they do to also help
Mm.
stop suicide, to end suicide. I mean, a very lofty, lofty goal. But
Right.
wouldn't it be incredible if we could get to the place where no one feels that they're alone in this, that uh,
Right.
that there are people to talk to.
That is so beautiful. I think, yeah, just your energy and your support for these programs and your willingness to bring awareness to not only the Walk to End Suicide, but suicide awareness in general across all of, the GTA, Canada, and the globe
Mm.
is truly incredible, Nathan. And I appreciate you so much being here today.
I'm happy. Again, I wish that I didn't have to be, but I'm happy that,
Right?
yeah, but I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy if even if this helps somebody even a little bit, the way that I have been helped so immensely, and thanks to you and to all of the incredible volunteers and the staff at distress centers for doing this amazing work that nobody would dream of doing. It's You guys are heroes, truly.
And you as well, like we are ones who choose life,
Mm.
and we choose to support those who are struggling, and we do our best to be out here and maybe, yeah, walk to end suicide.
Yeah.
And like you said, a lofty goal.
Yeah.
Seems like a little bit impossible, but we're gonna do it we're gonna do it anyway.
Absolutely.
That's what I love about it. I
Absolutely.
love the absurdity of this
Yeah.
goal. Like, like
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
gonna happen, but we're gonna try anyway.
That's right. That's right. Maybe not this year, but we're making a
But
difference. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not this
Yeah.
year. Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Right.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nathan.
Thanks, Will.